Welcome to Decide to Transform. You made it to level 2, deeper questions leading to deeper answers. I'm Tomas Garza, and I'm here to help you decide to transform. I'll be setting the pace for the process to support your unfolding. Learn and commit to a practice that brings simplicity and awareness of what is ready to be released. Join me now and allow the experience of a deeper sense of love. Hello, and welcome to Decide to Transform. I'm your host, Tomas Garza, and I am so happy that you've joined me here today on Om Times Radio. We have an excellent and really hard-hitting show on tap for you today. Given everything that's going on in the world, I think it's time for a deep examination of how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive one another, and how we relate to both, to ourselves, to one another, and to the entire world. There's never a bad time for a re-examination of everything that you now believe. And especially now. This is true without a global pandemic, of course, by the way. There's never a bad time to take up yoga, for example. There's never a bad time to explore your spirituality. There's never a bad time to think about how you are relating to and connecting with other people. There's never a bad time to think about how you're showing up in the world. Are you standing in your own truth? How are you being, so to speak? How do you show up? There's never a bad time to think about any of that. And our topic today is Transformation 101, the ego, where we will be digging deep. And we are going through, in the month of March, a series. This is the second of 4 shows that I'm calling Transformation 101. This is a series that's based on 4 of the introductory chapters in my book, Decide, which I published last year. And if you do not own it, I'll give you some more information about that. And there will be an ad during the commercial break about the book during this broadcast. So I will give you that information. But these chapters are foundational, not just for a book on personal transformation, but they're foundational for people's spiritual practice. And there are some concepts in there that I've been talking about here on the radio show and that I will talk about in the next 2 weeks here, winding up the month of March. This week, we're talking about the ego. Last week, we talked about the difference between love and fear, with love and fear being, in truth, the only 2 emotions that human beings experience. Now, we may experience a gradation among those, but anything that uplifts us is a manifestation of love. And by that, I mean happiness, I mean joy, I mean really, really wonderful, spontaneous belly laughter, right? All of these are manifestations of love. And on the other side, there's fear. And fear is fear, whether that shows up as anxiety, whether that shows up as depression, as hatred, as rage, anger, sadness, frustration, you name it. So the bottom line on all of this is we have a choice moment to moment as to which one we decide to honor. It's a decision moment to moment, and it's a choice. And I would invite all of us listening to get out of the habit, if you can, and really I highly recommend this, is get out of the habit, if you can, of saying, I have to make a choice, I have to make a decision, I have to do this, I have to do that. Because if we look at that, there is a root of consequence and possibly punishment, possibly really, really harsh punishment if we do not do what we have to do. That's language that is very common, and we all fall into that because we've been raised that way, and society talks about it that way. I have to do this. I have to go to work. Or these days, I have to stay home. I have to telecommute. I have to work via Zoom. I have to stay with my family. I have to stay with my kids, my spouse. What do I do? Right? a have to language is not serving. Think rather, and I invite you to do this, that I get to. That I get to make a decision as to whether I choose love or fear. I get to. It is a privilege and an honor, and it's a blessing to be able to stand in my own truth, to be able to show up right now in love, as love, extending love, rather than fear. Rather than spreading panic, do I spread calmness and tranquility? This is a question for all of us to answer. Are you choosing love or are you choosing fear? And if you have not heard last week's episode of Decide to Transform, I invite you to go back and give that a listen. Indeed, it's one of the beauties of a podcast is that you can listen to it 24/7, anytime, any place that you are. So go back and give that a listen because there's a lot of powerful material there, a lot of powerful information. And I ask some questions that are very basic because we have this choice to make. We have this decision to make every moment of every day. Are we choosing love or are we choosing fear? And it's very timely, of course. It's never not timely, if that makes sense. It's never out of place to be asking the deeper questions. So one of my themes for today, and indeed the most prominent really, is how are you going to choose love today? How are you going to choose love? How might you do that? And we'll cover more about this further in the broadcast, especially toward the end of the show. But I want to leave you with this question to think about as you're listening live or if you're listening to the replay. How are you going to choose love today? How are you going to extend that and show that for yourself and for other people? Now, don't neglect yourself, please. This is all too common, and we all do this. Some people find that when we're talking forgiveness, it's very easy to forgive other people, but not ourselves. So how might you choose love today? And we will go through, and I will give you some information about the concept of the ego, which is the title of today's show in Transformation 101. And what I want to do here is I want to set the scene by reading one paragraph from my book. From my book, Decide, and the subtitle of the book, incidentally, is How to Replace Your Fictions with Truth, Go Big in Life, and Transform Audaciously. So I'm going to lift this right out of the beginning of Chapter 3. Now, Chapter 3 is entitled The Ego. Here on the show, I'll be explaining a little bit more, in fact, quite a bit more about what this is. So let me read the first paragraph out loud here. We believe we are running around as a body. This organism, little more than an agglomeration of water, somehow comes to constitute us. All of our senses confirm this. We seem to be contained by this agglomeration, encased within it and acting on its behalf. According to everything the world shows us, we are this body. I use the words believe and seem to be for a reason. In truth, we are not bodies. You are not a body, and neither am I. Let this serve as the first of many radical truths to be considered in this discussion. As we examine our unhelpful stories, and you personally consider your desire to start walking across that bridge, bear this in mind. You are not a body. End quote. So, let's get deep and let's consider things that we may not have considered. And perhaps you've considered this extensively in your life, in your own spiritual practice. But in the spirit of the times, let's get real. Let's get real. We seem to be encased in a physical body. All of our senses, sight, taste, smell, sound, feeling, bodily sensations seem to confirm this for us. And in truth, this is not who we are. It's not what we are. So if you are skeptical of this, I invite that. In fact, in all of my teachings, I invite skeptics. I really do. As long as you commit to disbelieving and being skeptical in the spirit of discourse, right? I always used to, as a university professor, encourage discussion and debate amongst my students. Just because I'm up there with the lectern teaching on the whiteboard, etc., doesn't mean I am the sole arbiter of truth and people's opinions are not valid. In fact, they're 100% valid. But skepticism is okay because I want people to ask the questions. I want everyone to examine the foundations of what they really believe. And that's what today's discussion is about, because it is about how you show up in the world, in a world where this physical body is subject to disease. It's subject to the whims and the motions of a global pandemic. People fear getting sick. And this is true in every situation in life, not just these days. It's true all of the time. People fear getting sick. Right? Nobody wants to get sick. Nobody wants to leave the physical body behind. So I invite the skepticism here. You are not a body. This is not who we ultimately are. And I just invite all of you listening today to just consider that. Even if you think about it for a couple of minutes and then you go off and think about something else and carry on with your day and your life, that's good for me. In fact, I've already succeeded on this radio show by posing the question and causing you to think about it. That was my aim today. So mission accomplished. Let's go further. All right? I just want to encourage radical, deep thought and examination. I always want to encourage this, but it's especially important in today's day and age when our entire society, this is worldwide, all societies, our entire way of life is undergoing a quick, rapid upheaval. It is. And it's literally moment to moment. There's always something new in the news, and there is always something else coming up, and it just seems like it's happening at warp speed. It's constant. So let's talk then about the ego. And this is something that is very prominent as a terminology in Eastern spirituality, in Hinduism and in Buddhism. If you have ever studied or practiced one of those two religious systems, or here in the West, worldwide indeed, if you are familiar with A Course in Miracles, A Course in Miracles is a spiritual text that makes reference to the ego, and it's the ego as contrasted with our true self, or God, the universe, who we really are. And next week on the show, I will get further into the concept of absolute and relative truth and how they're different from each other. That is part of the series Transformation 101. But here in the world, which is where we find ourselves, we identify with the physical body. When we say the word me, that's almost always what someone is referring to. It's what we're referring to. Yes, my knee hurts, right? I'm sleepy. And this is my jacket, right? It goes on my physical body. We identify with this. And let's entertain the notion that there's something more out there. Some of you are probably skeptical of this, and many of you listening to this particular station are not. So let's go deeper. Wherever you find yourself, whatever your spiritual background is, all of it is welcome and valid here. And it's valid anytime, especially on this show. This is universal. So what is and what isn't reality? I invite everybody to consider that. Because all spiritual traditions, whatever their outer rituals may look like, whatever their origin or place of origin in the world, whether they come from the Middle East or Asia, North America, Europe, wherever these stem from, right? there are some common threads that are common to every single one of them. And to me, in all of my teachings, the definition of an authentic spiritual tradition, to me, is a tradition that helps you let go of the ego, that teaches people to get out of their own way and to stop separating themselves, because the ego and separation are one and the same. And we'll say more about that throughout the broadcast. The ego is a psychological construct that posits us as separate from everyone else. Independently existing, we seem to independently exist and run around in a physical body, as a physical body, feeding the body's needs, eating food, drinking water, taking medicine, staying home to prevent the spread of coronavirus, if that's where you are. We are in, so it appears, this body, and we identify with it. It's a psychological sense of separation where other people are going about their lives and they seem to be doing their own thing. Certainly it looks like it. People have different jobs. People have different careers. They live in different parts of the world. They have different sized families. Some are tall, some are short. You name it. There are all kinds of variations that exist in the world. And what is common is that we all are running around feeling and thinking that we're separate. And I invite us today to consider how we're really not separate. Let's leave it at that and break for a quick commercial. When we come back, we will take the first of our listener questions for today. Stick around and be prepared to go deep with yourself on today's show. We'll be right back.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. Om Times, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hi, I'm Tomas Garza, author of Decide and host of Decide to Transform on Om Times Radio. I want to ask you, if you want something in life, have you decided on it? If not, you'll listen to a limiting story about yourself. You will say you can't, you're too old, too young, etc. Decide to transform in life. Learn what you can choose to believe instead of your limiting stories. Decide. Available now in paperback and ebook.
Did you know that you have the power to change anything in your life? Did you know you can do so even with the things that you've already decided are impossible to change? Come join me, Venus Castleberg, on Outside the Impossible as I interview people from around the globe that have literally changed the things they thought were impossible to change just by using the amazing tools of Access Consciousness. Now airing Wednesdays 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Do you dare to believe that anything really is possible?
Opiates has taken everything and everyone I've ever loved away from me. Everything.
I blew my ankle out and I got prescribed pain pills by my doctor.
If making my detox public is going to help somebody, I'm all for it. So I just wish I would have had a warning.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth. A message from Truth, the Ad Council, and ONDCP.
Welcome back to Decide to Transform. I'm your host, Tomas Garza, and happy St. Patrick's Day, by the way. It's March 17th. And we have a really hard-hitting show for you. We just are in the midst as a species of an unprecedented upheaval, and these things have happened over the course of human history, but most of us don't remember the flu epidemic of 1918, right? I doubt there are many of us that were alive then. If you are, you're over 100 years old. And, this is new for most of us. And the modern world is so connected, it's so easy to pass information, which is great because who doesn't love to send documents via email instead of the regular mail, right? Who doesn't love looking up something in Google or on a search engine instead of having to go to the library and wade through the Dewey Decimal System? If you're really young, you don't even probably remember what that is, but I certainly do. I'm 48. So we share information so quickly with each other, and it's both beautiful and not so beautiful, because it means just as quickly as we're able to send and extend love and healing energy to people, we can also extend anxiety, terror, and fear. Just as quickly. Boom. Just like that. So where we are here is we're discussing the psychological construct of the ego, and I continue to refer to it as that because I invite us all to consider that there's more than meets the eye, so to speak. There's more than meets our bodily senses. And intuitively, people know this. Otherwise, people wouldn't talk about God. Otherwise, people wouldn't talk about spirit. Or people wouldn't refer to the universe as a higher power, as a force, so to speak. We wouldn't be having these discussions if there weren't some truth to it. And luckily, we have examples of people in the world that have experienced that truth, and that's what spiritual practice is. It's about experiencing who you really are. So who is that? Since we're on the theme of going deep. What if you actually, at your core, are not the body? You're not an independently existing human being running around with your own needs, taking care of your own business while everyone else takes care of theirs. And maybe people cooperate, maybe they don't. In A Course in Miracles, the spiritual text, there is a 2-word sentence that sums up absolute truth. And I'll talk more about that next week on the show, but absolute truth is the ground of all reality. And what the Course in Miracles says is, God is. Okay, by God, I'm referring to, well, God, you can call God whatever you would like, right? You can call it spirit, source, your higher self, you name it. Whatever that term is to you is the ground of all being. And in Eastern philosophy, the nature of mind, the ground of all being simply is. And that means everything else simply appears to be. Now that is absolute and relative truth. And we'll talk about that. You may be familiar with these terms, but I want to invite you to consider this in terms of our discussion today of the ego. And this leads us right into the first of our listener questions. There are 2 of them today. One of them is general. The first one is a general question that people have asked me throughout my life as a teacher. And the question is this, and it's been phrased many different ways by many different people, and you may be asking this yourself, is, okay, do you expect me to believe that none of this is real? In other words, do you expect me to believe that none of my experience is real and is really happening? All of the aches and pains that I suffer, all of the bills that arrive that I don't want to pay or can't, possibly? Do you expect me to believe that all of this that's happening in the world, with people buying all the Clorox bleach and toilet paper, do you expect me to believe that this is not real? Okay, that's the question. I've been asked this many times by many different people, and here's my answer, is you don't have to. So no, you don't have to believe that this is all a dream. You don't have to believe anything. What I invite you to do is consider your own experience. I do. I invite you to consider your own experience in your own life. And here's the question. How is your current situation working out for you? Are you experiencing anxiety? Are you experiencing frustration, pain, anger, sadness? Are you experiencing all of that mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, even physically? Yeah, how is that working out for you? How is that current situation? I invite you to consider that very sincerely, because you don't have to believe in anything that a spiritual teacher like Jesus or Buddha or anyone else would have to say. Nobody is saying you must believe this. And even if they are, you don't have to agree with them. You don't have to agree with a friend or family member that insists that you're wrong because you don't believe a certain way. Similarly, when we talk about the ego, when we talk about absolute truth being the ground of all being, I do not expect that anyone is going to believe that none of this is actually going on just because I say, in the relative, in the world, it is going on. It is going on, and we do have to follow World Health Organization protocol. We do have to follow our local authorities. If we're told we must stay home by our job, by our local government, then we must stay home. We have to operate in the relative world. However, there's something more out there. Yes, there's something more higher that underlies all of this varied experience, that underlies all of the chaos, all the hysteria, and all of the fear. Yes, there is something more, and I don't expect people to just believe it. Spirituality is not about belief. Let me repeat that. You may have been told otherwise, especially as a young person. It's not about belief. It's not about who you believe or what you believe in. It's about experience. It's about experience, folks. It's about, do you experience these truths? Are you experiencing life as love and joy and happiness? Are you experiencing that more often than the manifestations of fear, such as panic buying, long lines at the grocery store, frustration, rage, anger, irritation? And the reason that I ask, how is your current situation working out for you, is it's very easy to scoff at spirituality. It's very easy to scoff at people that practice these traditions. Now, modernly, there are a number of people that do not. However, it almost seems sometimes like we're outnumbered by the people that dismiss all of this as woo-woo, which is, in my book, woo-woo. If someone says, yeah, this is woo-woo stuff, then what they're saying is, I'm really afraid of this. I'm really afraid of it because it's threatening the ego. It's threatening my sense of an independently existing self. And that's threatened. So here's what happens. And the reason I ask how is your current situation working out for you, is because when we identify as the ego, as a separately existing unit, and I think for the rest of the show, I'd like to use that term, unit. I once had a friend who put on a resume that she was a self-sustaining survival unit. And she got the job, by the way. This was in the 1990s. But we identify with ourselves Yeah, as a body, as a separately existing unit. And what happens is we feel like we're the center of the world. And it's normal for a toddler to feel that they're the center of the world, or a baby and cry. They get attention. They're the center of their own universe. And even as adults, when you would think that we know better, we don't. And this mass hysteria simply proves it. Do you know people that bought hundreds of dollars worth of toilet paper? I don't know. I don't personally, but I've been to the stores with the empty shelves. This is a current reality. And in our ego-identified state, we struggle with each other because we believe that there is a limited amount of resources available. It's a zero-sum game in economic terms because we compete with each other. We try to get our slice of the proverbial pie, so to speak. And in truth, in reality, there is no pie. There are no limits. God is. The limitations appear to happen on the surface, but there's more to it. And as an ego-identified unit, we run into conflict with each other. We argue with one another. And in extreme cases, this can lead to armed conflict. It can lead to war. And it almost always leads to misinformation and dissemination of misinformation because everybody appears to be processing information differently. Something that someone sees that they consider beautiful, someone else might consider ugly. I like to use the analogy of roasted peanuts. You may love them and adore them and the smell and the taste, lightly salted, or you may be allergic to them and it might be a matter of life and death. Now that, my friends, is very much relative truth in action. So with all of these manifestations of separation going on, are you tired of experiencing fear and frustration? Do you want more inner peace in your life? Do you want to experience more joy in your life? And my hope for each and every one of you is that the answer is yes. The answer is yes, I want more peace and joy. I would like to have more happy moments. I would like to feel lighter in my own being. I would like my self-talk to be a little bit lighter, more uplifting, more positive, more along the lines of I can rather than I can't. I hope that you're saying this to yourself. And here's where I hope that this leads you and takes you, and that's to your own spiritual practice, whatever that looks like for you. Now, I want to state here that I'm not talking, when I talk about spirituality, I am not necessarily talking about an established world tradition like Christianity or Buddhism or Hinduism, Islam, whatever that is, or a shamanic practice. I'm not talking about something like that necessarily. If that is what it involves for you, then that is absolutely wonderful, because there's wisdom in all of those major traditions, because there's a common thread, and that's absolute truth, which is what you are. It's who you are. There's that. I also have to say that spirituality involves, for people, sometimes a lot more than just an organized spiritual tradition, and that is perfectly valid. If it helps you in your own self-care, and if it helps you to feel more peace and more joy in your daily life, moment to moment, then how could you not say that that activity is spiritual? It is spiritual. A walk in the fresh air could be your spiritual practice. Right? A bubble bath could be your spiritual practice. That's what it could be. It could be going to the gym. It could be practicing yoga. It could be listening to music that uplifts you. Now, it doesn't matter what that is. It could be hardcore hip-hop for you, or it could be classical music. It could be anything in between. It doesn't have to be the ambient sound yoga station on Spotify, though it is for many. This is where your own personal preferences are highly valid. That's where your own proclivities are highly valid, because what constitutes spiritual practice for you is going to look differently than what constitutes spiritual practice for someone else. While I have meditated almost all of my life, including all of my adult life, I don't pretend that that is going to be the go-to solution for everybody, though I do think it clearly benefits everybody. What I'm saying here is that another person's way of doing things is not wrong if it leads them away from the ego and toward greater happiness, peace, and love, because that is shared. And before we break, I want to simply invite everyone to consider another concept, and that is you are always teaching. It does not make any difference whether you hold yourself out as a teacher or an instructor or a workshop facilitator or not. You are always teaching because you're always showing up for people, around people. And the question is, how are you showing up? Are you communicating love and a sense of togetherness? Or are you communicating fear and separation? So the fear and separation is the ego. The love and togetherness is God, or our higher self, spirit, source, the ground of all being, who we really, really are deep down. And we have the choice, moment to moment, to choose love. So let's break for our second commercial here. And when we come back, we'll do a guided meditation and talk about how you can choose love right now, today. You're listening to Decide to Transform on Om Times Radio. We'll be right back.
Free your mind with Om Times Radio, IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
Hi, I'm Tomas Garza, host of Decide to Transform on Om Times Radio. Thank you for listening. You know, there's only so much we can cover on a 1-hour show. If you'd like to hear further from me, I happily offer personalized teachings. Get your very own voice recording or book a one-on-one consultation. Ask a burning question and gain clarity on achieving massive transformation in your life. Details available on my website, tomasgarza.com.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
I'm Fidel Nsombo. I was born in a city called the Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Decide to Transform. I'm your host, Tomas Garza, and I hope you're enjoying today's live broadcast. We are going through the ego and the sense of separation. This is a subject that receives a lot of attention in world traditions for a very, very good reason. And that is because at the core, we are not the ego. We are not separate from one another. And while all of the evidence appears to suggest otherwise, spiritual practice is about experiencing the opposite, that we're all connected and indeed that we are united, one. So right here at this point on the show, I'd like to take us through a short guided meditation. So I invite you to get calm. If you're not calm, please do so. Take a few deep breaths. Get comfortable wherever you are, except if you're driving a car. If you're driving a car, then please, by all means, keep driving and be safe. But if you're sitting at home or wherever you happen to find yourself, you could be poolside in the tropics somewhere, or not. Maybe you're in your living room with the fire going and it's snowing outside. But wherever you are, just get comfortable here and take a moment to take a couple of deep breaths and just breathe in and notice your breath. And take your time. Breathe normally. And just notice the air going into your body, and then as you exhale, notice it going out. And pay attention to whether you feel any calmer. Our short meditation here live on the broadcast is about the power of the mind and the power of our creative imagination, which is incidentally independent from the physical body. So as you breathe normally, you may choose to close your eyes, or if you prefer, feel welcome to leave them open. And whichever you choose, imagine that you're going back in time to when you were a child. And imagine that you go back to your grandmother's house. And if you did not know your grandmother, make it someone else's house. And travel back in time to her kitchen. And what do you see there? Is anything cooking? What are the smells that you experience? And stay with that for a moment as you breathe normally. Maybe she's making something for you, maybe not. But what does it look like? Is there a window? What does the light look like? And stay with this scene, whatever that looks like for you, for a few moments, and understand that this vision that you're experiencing, this sight, this scene, is taking place perhaps thousands of kilometers away. It might be taking place in another country, and it's taking place in another time, while your physical body is seated or lying down or standing comfortably where you were when this meditation started. This is all taking place independently of the body that's sitting in meditation. Our minds move. We travel in time, as you're doing right now. We travel in space, as you're doing right now. And I invite you to consider, as you continue to breathe in and out normally, at your normal rate, that life and experience is not as limited as you imagine. There are other possibilities. In truth, you are free. You are not a body. You are free. In your mind, you are free and unlimited. So stay with this scene as long as you like, and take another deep breath or two. And as we come out of this short meditation, simply keep in mind that you are not limited, that life is not as limited as we might imagine, despite being mandated to stay at home and work from home or not work. Despite what you may see on the news, life is not as limited as you imagine. This was as true before the coronavirus outbreak as it is during, and it will be equally true after all of this is over. Life is not as limited as you imagine it to be. Oh, I hope you enjoyed a quick guided meditation wherever you are. Let's talk about reintegrating here. It's very important after any spiritual practice, whether it's a walk or a bubble bath or a prayer session, or you attend a worship service, a church, a temple, a synagogue, a mosque, whatever it is, however you do that, if you come out of a yoga practice or a meditation, there's a phrase in yoga, taking your practice off the mat. In Buddhism, we always used to refer to it as taking your practice off the cushion. In other words, what happens when you stand up and go back out into the world? But let's talk about that for a couple of minutes here. What I want to have everyone consider here, especially in today's challenging time, because it most certainly is that, a challenging time, consider how you can join on a spiritual level, on a mental and emotional, psychological level with other people, even in forced isolation. You can do this because we're not simply just this body. How can you join with other people? In other words, how can you choose love? How can you choose joy and peace right now, today, wherever you find yourself? Because every act of peace, every act of love is timely and relevant, always. This is not something that we should just practice during a worldwide scare. This is something that is intended to survive the worldwide scare, and my hope is that whatever internal work you do during these challenging times will become habitual for you, that you will commit to a practice that will enable you to go deeper and unpeel some of these layers of separation and pain and ego in your life. That is my hope for all of us, because this topic is both timely and relevant, and it will be next week and the week after that and the week after that. So even if you don't listen to this broadcast until a month from now or a year from now, my hope is that you will take many things, not just one thing, but if it's one, it's better than none, but many things of value out of this. So let's read the second of our listener questions here today in the time that remains to us. And this is, again, a general question that many people have asked me. Now, incidentally, one of the things that I love to do here on the show is read your questions, and you can get a hold of me to ask a burning question about your own spirituality or about your own personal growth, transformation, wellness, whatever it is. Feel welcome to reach out to me if we're connected on Facebook by a private message. I'm on Messenger, and you are also welcome to email me. And the email address for questions is Tomas. That's Tomas. There's no H in that. It's tomas@tomasgarza.com, and a number of people have emailed questions in the past. I like to read them out because the entire world benefits. And that's so needed. It's so relevant right now. So here is the second of general questions that we've got here. And that is, what do you suggest? This is something that people have asked me, so let's talk about it. I've been asked many times in the past, what do you suggest for continuing to extend peace and love and join with people? Okay, and I'm going to add to this, given the current circumstances. So you can read the question as, what do you suggest for continuing to extend peace and love and join with people in this time of social distancing and mass panic? That last bit is my own addition. People have often asked, okay, what do you suggest for continuing to extend peace and love? And with the addition, right now in the current circumstances, social distancing is a term, it's a phrase, it's a thing. And I went for a hike with my wife at Saguaro National Park in Arizona 2 days ago, and I had to think to myself and even laugh to myself that, yes, I've been practicing this form of social distancing my entire life. It's spirituality and it's part of self-care. So a number of you, I acknowledge, may be in situations that are completely unfamiliar to you, and you might be freaking out. You might well be freaking out. So how do you continue to extend peace and love and a sense of community? The beauty of being here on an internet radio show live is that we have modern 21st century technology. We all have these at our disposal. We have social media at our disposal. We have video chats at our disposal. We have Zoom and Skype at our disposal. We have all kinds of different video and communication tools online that I have no idea about. And you can always call somebody. There's always the old-fashioned telephone. There are many ways that you can continue to connect, and one of the strongest and best ways that we can continue to connect and extend love to one another and transcend the ego is to do your own inner work. I cannot stress that enough. To do your own inner work, whatever that looks like for you. If that means giving yourself some grace and some patience and some time to rest, then that is what that means. If you are able to go out for a walk in the fresh air, that is what that means. If you practice a spiritual tradition, then go deeper with that tradition. Pray, meditate, practice, whatever that looks like. Do some physical exercise. If you have to do it at home, get creative. But take care of yourself, and it's very important that we all do the inner work at this time, because that is what's going to produce the healing that the world needs. It's going to produce the sense of calm that the world needs, that everyone around you needs, because like it or not, we are all teaching all of the time. Now, are you teaching love or are you teaching fear? That's the question. And please, please, please do not worry if you've been teaching fear. Because right now, in the present moment, today, this very second, you have the opportunity to choose again. You get to. You get to decide to choose love. You get to extend it. And I simply cannot stress that enough. You get to. So I hope that you have enjoyed the show for today. Next week, we are going to continue with the series Transformation 101, and we will dig deeper into the concept of the two truths, being absolute and relative truth. Relative truth belonging to the ego, sense of separation that we all must leave behind. Well, I hope you've gotten plenty of value out of today's broadcast. You've been listening to Decide to Transform on Om Times Radio. Have a great week, everybody. I'll see you next week.